Hello, everyone, and welcome to number two of our winter lecture series. My name is Corey. I am the horticulturist at McLaughlin Garden and also the organizer this year for our winter lecture series. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Bev Stevens of Old Glory Bees and Honey. As you can see, she's got a whole spread here already, and she's going to talk to you about what bees are doing in winter. And just before that, I'd like to say we can't have this kind of programming without your support. So if you have any interest in making a donation, even just $5, it'd be much appreciated. For the folks in person, we have donation buckets over here. And for the folks who are joining on Zoom, we'll put a link in the comments where you can make a donation. So without further ado, I present Bev.
Thank you, everybody. It's good to be here. We actually have bees here in the summertime in the back part of the garden. And it's interesting, so interesting and so much fun. So part of our adventure, my husband and I started this a couple of years ago. There's actually a therapy program. We always started small and we have grown consistently every year. And this year it's been quite the adventure. We did a lot more traveling, we did a lot more work, we did a lot more little pieces of the business. So before I get into the winter bees, because that is a whole category of our adventure, they're a whole different breed than the summer bees. Let me start a little bit with our history. It's been about 3 years. We have grown from initially just a couple hives here and there to now doing year-round work with them. The winter projects right now, as you can see, are the candles. We do more bottling. We keep a lot more of our equipment on hand. We keep a lot more adventurous things, such as queen honey. We try to do more beeswax. We try to do more supply and demand. So we're getting ready to monitor for the spring. So our equipment's getting set up. We're getting a lot more of our daily grind ready to go. What I have with me today is a couple of things for our bees and what they actually do to get ready for winter. We are looking at a 10 frame hive. This is just my display box and has a lot of information and stuff in it, but this is what we work with. When these are full of bees and full of honey, these can weigh up to 60 pounds. They get very heavy, and each hive usually has about two. We try to keep them 1 to 2. We watch for how full the hive is of bees in the summertime. And then in the fall, we get the honey supers, which are a shorter box than this. Still weigh just as much because it's packed only with honey. They don't go up and lay brood. We keep them just for the honey production. And it is a jour and a half to move them. You want to have a good working job, you get your workouts during the summertime moving all these boxes. Now, the other part we have here is a smaller box. It's from a nuke box. This is a 5 frame box. And what you see on top is actually what we would use for wintertime for feeding. So we try to, which works better. We have a 10 frame full hive overwintered, and we also overwinter smaller boxes. So if you mimic nature for our bees, which we try to do as much as possible. Bees are instinctual. They are the basic nature. If you follow them and really look at them, they do everything by how the seasons go. So if they're in the wild, you're gonna have a smaller section like this one, simply because you think in the wild they're in trees. They're in something that's confined. They have something that's on natural border. So they would grow up into the tree and just go up and down. When you use these size boxes, it's a little different because they're spaced out longer. They're going side to side instead of up and down. So we manipulate them enough. And the reason we do this is for health and safety. We can actually go in, take a frame out, monitor for any diseases, monitor for any health, see what's going on. You can find your queen a lot easier in this type of hive. And that's for the benefit of everybody. We can harvest honey easier. We can actually see what they're doing. And we can just, make sure that they're healthy all the time. In the wild, what they would normally do, any sign of disease, people are like, well, they're swarmed. They're not swarming because they're just not happy. They're swarming because it's their health. If there's something wrong in the hive, they're not happy with the queen, they're not happy with the surroundings, or something may be wrong with them, they'll leave where they're going, find a new place, and grow again. And that's the best way to go. If there's any questions, you guys, while I'm doing this, please send him a message.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Why would the bees not be happy with the queen?
So Interesting. Everybody thinks the queen is in charge of the hive, but it's not. It's actually a combination. The uh, working bees keep track of her. So there's a pheromone back and forth. The queen has a pheromone they all follow. But if they sense that something's off with her, she's not laying right, she may be sick, she may be old, they're just not meshing. The rest of the worker bees will actually say, we're done with you. We don't want you. You need to go, or we need to fight the queen. So they balance each other out. It's not a one versus the other. It's a combination. They back and forth together. So it's interesting when you actually look at the dynamics of a hive that you think it's the queen, but it's really not. It's the working balance between the two. Then you also have your drones in there who are just there to read the queen and socialize. So there's a third working part, but that's a whole other aspect of that. The major part of it is your queen and your worker bees, which are all female and can sting you. Drones can't sting you. Interesting point too. So
What's that, drones can't what?
they can't sting you.
Oh.
Drones don't sting you. If you get stung, it's by a worker bee.
Oh,
So they're just another part of the social aspect of a hive. They can actually go from hives that are not theirs and they'll visit and they'll just kind of do their own thing, eat food. They'll bring food back, but they go in and eat food and socialize and they go back home. So that's something that we're learning. There's a lot of stuff we learn new every year. And you think ahead of time, like, that's not that difficult. They're just bees. I'm like, no, there's a whole aspect of them that once you get into a hive and get playing with them and see them and watch them work, it's very interesting to watch. So any other questions? Okay, so back to the winter bees.
you'd almost think that the working bees would be very jealous of them.
Worker bees are fascinating because they just don't care. Their only goal, well, they have chores and responsibilities in the hive, but their only goal is just work, monitor, work. It's just fascinating to watch them, how they have the different goals. They don't care what another bee is doing. They're doing what they need to do and they take care of that hive. They are the primary hive. Yeah, say they're the workers. So they're interesting to say the least. So there's guard bees, there's nurse bees, there's foragers. And as they go through their life progression, they have different responsibilities. So newbies will come out and they have to orient to this hive. Once they orient, they can bring food back. Then the ones that were foraging are now doing different roles. They take out dead bees, take care of the brood, take care of the queen. They progress up until they don't have to go and forage. So as you see these different stages and you just see bees outside of the hive, they're all at different ages. So it's kind of fascinating their life cycle of a worker bee in the summer. Now that's your summer bee. Your winter bee is complete opposite. Summer bees will live can live an average 2 months. They have a reproduction cycle of 21 days. So you're always getting new bees in up until fall. In the fall is when you have your winter bee ready. So the queen is laying a different type of bee. It's actually called a winter bee, where they will live up to 6 months because their whole focus is to survive this hive in the winter. They're not working, they're not foraging, they're not taking care of baby bees. They're only surviving in this hive, and that's their job. So one of the most frequent questions we actually get asked is, what do they do in the winter? What happens to them? They're not hibernating, they're surviving. So in this size box, or in this one, what you'll have, and if you look down in the hive box between these frames, you'll have a ball like this. As the temperature drops, they all come together and they protect the queen. The queen's in the middle, and they actually disconnect their wings a little bit and they cause friction that causes heat. They don't stop. They're always doing something in the winter to keep warm. They're keeping that hive at a temperature they can live at. So in this ball on the inside, they'll rotate out all winter long. So they keep a reproduction going. And that way they kind of all can mesh around this queen. And they'll move up. So if you have your bottom box, they'll be in the middle because we keep the food. Usually they store their food in the middle. And that's what happens. This ball stays tight like this. And they'll go up through your hive all winter long to get to food. They'll drop back down if they need to, but they follow where the food is. So as you're looking at these frames, you're going to see, tip it out for you. You'll see between these frames, they'll come up to the next box. And they'll move a little bit, but bees tend, like I said, they go up and down more than side to side. So as you're storing honey, if they can't find a way to get across this box and up to the next frame, they can start to have plenty of food in their hive. There's a lot of intricate ways you have to feed them to make sure they get what they need, because they're not gonna break that cluster if it's cold to get to a different section of their hive to feed. So when we get ready to prepare them for winter, we've got your boxes all set, they're closed in. You lift it and it's hard to lift, they get plenty of food. Food is heavy. One of these frames, well, no honey in it, this is just an educational frame, but when there's no honey in it, it has just wax. That's only a few ounces. By the time they're done storing honey, if they store a full frame of food, they can weigh anywhere from 8 to 10 pounds. Average is 8 though, but that's 8 pounds that they can eat. And it takes them a lot longer when it's colder, they move slower. So they're not able to break all that food down quickly. It lasts them longer. Now, if you have a mild winter, they're eating that food pretty quickly. It's not going to last long. So they have to make sure they have enough on the top of their feet. So you fill your boxes and you kind of like, well, it looks like it's going to be a warm winter. So we'll give them a little extra. So that's when this comes in. Now we have 2 sizes. And like I said, we're trying to experiment. We don't know which one works better. In some hives, every hive is different. So some like this better in a smaller box. Some like this better in a bigger box. As you work with them all summer, you get a feel for what the hive wants and likes. It's very, very broad. So you have to really watch them. So what you do is this has a screen on the bottom. You make a cake almost, or a candy board. So you're mixing water, sugar, a little bit of honey. Sometimes people put vinegar in it too. It helps with beneficial properties. But you put this all in there and you make sure it's nice and settled. So it's almost like a candy. It's not soft, it's not mush, it won't go down through. So as winter comes through, it's cold enough that it sits here. And they can come up through that frame, through this mesh, and eat to their heart's content. And there's nothing stopping them from going any which way they want. They can go across either way or around, back and forth. This is so they can get out in the winter. So when you get your hive going in the winter, you're going to have dead bees. It's a guarantee regardless. They're not all going to survive. As they fall to the bottom, your bottom entrance can sometimes get blocked. And if you think about it, during the winter, if they're up here, they're not going all the way down to the hive alone to get out. If they're up here eating, that's the quickest access. So they can get out, do their cleansing flights, because they don't have to eat in the hive if they can help it. So they're going to come up here and eat, go and fly out, come back in. And it's all accessible. So we're trying to make sure, okay, if we think they're not having enough food in these boxes, we'll add this and make sure they have enough. And by springtime, if we can just peek up under the cover, not have to get into the hive, we can say, oh, they got plenty of food, or hey, they've eaten a lot of food, we can add more. So this is still closed up. You can add food so they can have more resources. So it's kind of a half and half. You're watching to see what they do on their own, but you're helping them as much as you can. So those are 2 different things. The other thing we have to look at when we're closing winter bees, because bees keep it warm and mice, voles, little critters like to get in this box and over winter. They destroy the hive. They're not just going to get warm. They'll eat all the wax, eat all the food. And it's really interesting because we've gone in sometimes and seen, open the top and you can see a whole mess right between 2 frames. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look right. That's not bees, because they'll bring other stuff in and it's not good. So what they do is they make a nest in that corner. And I'm like, well, the hive's gone. There's a mouse in there. They've destroyed it. And now, shockingly enough, in the winter, sometimes it's a half and half situation, but the bees are on one side, the mouse is there. They're done damage. You can see the damage is there, but the bees and them cohabitate just enough to get through winter. So other times you've gone in and bees make what's called propolis, which is glue. It's basically a bee glue. Antimicrobial, antibacterial. It's really good for you. But if they feel that that's an issue, they will surround this thing. Don't ask me how they do it, because they have to do it quick. But they'll surround it in this bee glue and actually kill the bee in that box, because they're protecting it. They don't want them in there. Same thing with like when they close their entrances up. So I've gone in, and this year I should have known, I really should have known, because I was watching, and every time we went and checked a hive late in the fall, at the entrance, this hole on a couple boxes, they had glued it shut. I'm like, why would they do that? So I'm like, well, it's just, they don't know yet. It's a newer hive, we haven't had it in a couple years. Entrances are glued shut. It seemed any seams between boxes that glued shut, and the front entrance, the very bottom, was glued shut. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Well, there's a lot of theories and a lot of lore and a lot of old-fashioned wisdom, which I truly believe from time to time, that when you watch the bees, they'll tell you a prediction for what's coming in their own way, because their instincts are like, hey, this isn't, it's going to be a hard winter, or something's not right, or hey, this isn't working right. So most of our hives, when we got looking, I'm like, why are they all doing that? Never seen them do that. And this winter has not been a good winter. It's been very cold, as you all know, and there's been a lot of loss for colonies throughout this country. And I'm sitting there going, well, I should have paid attention, because I have a feeling they knew that something was going to be colder than usual. But little things like that, there's so many things that we don't personally know for our business, that a lot of beekeepers have done it for many, many years. Hey, they'll pass this on to you and go, just so you know, we've noticed this, trust it, because they have a lot of information that they've seen over the years. And I think it's just absolutely amazing that you have so much knowledge that's been passed down from beekeepers, and I love talking to them. They're just fascinating. But this is what I was going to bring up. Yes, hive entrances. So this will help with the bees as well. You put it in the front, it blocks a lot of the cold and the draft. We've gone in the spring, like this time of year, and looked around. And if you put your hand right in front of the hive, at the very bottom, you can tell right away if they're still alive. The heat that comes out of that hive is absolutely amazing. They can heat a hive on warmer days, even on really colder days, just enough to make sure they have that cylinder of heat they need. And we have really noticed that it's obvious when you just kind of touch them, listen to them. You cannot even open them and know that they're doing okay, because they make a lot of noise, obviously. But that's the two biggest things that we really watch for. The other thing we have to do for winter is prepare them for health-wise. So right now, there are several mites that are prevalent that are really harming the bees. As most people know, that's the biggest predator. The varroa mite is one that is here in the US and in Maine. This is what it looks like. It looks like a little crab, actually. So this is a scale model. If it was on a bee, I don't know if you can see if I come around the front here. It tends to be on the front of them. And if you just put it on your, what's the ratio of what it would look like on a bee? It's small on them, but on us, it's like that's the difference between the two. So what it does, it has all these, it clings to them. They can't brush them off. They kind of stick. And it takes a lot of the nutritional property from their abdomens and weakens them throughout the season. In the winter, it's been harder. They can't fight it as much. They're already down. So we kind of try to make sure we treat them through the season. Again, we prepare for winter well in advance of winter. So we start doing this in the spring, float all the way through to the fall, make sure they're good until we get them in the hive, and then we make sure to test them. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the biggest predators that we have to fight right now.
So is that a winter time?
So it is because it weakens them so much that winter takes a toll.
But I mean, what's like the season? What's the life cycle of the mite? Like when
it lives in their brood. It's 24/7 all year long. It just takes the biggest effect in the winter when they're already run down and trying to fight that cold.
Okay.
So that's when they're at their weakest and we can kill your hive the quickest. Okay. Because they're not raising new bees. They're not laying any eggs. Right. In the summertime, it's a constant cycle. You have new bees coming in. You can treat them more often. But in the winter, you can't treat them more. You can't really open them. You can't touch them. Right. And you can't have new bees to replace the ones that are dying. So it's harder for them to fight it. And by that point, if you haven't treated all year long, you're set up for a disadvantage. So that's something that we have to deal with. Again, it's a year-round thing. Winter bees you think are just a continuation, and they are, but it's a whole separate type of environment. And it's hard because my husband and I both have sat there in the middle of winter going, wonder how they're doing. I wonder how they're doing. Can we go check them? I'm like, we cannot go check them. We cannot go out there and open them. And we're both kind of like, well, yeah, it's a wait and see kind of game, and I don't like the wait and see kind of game.
You need
So,
to install little cameras.
I would love to. That's on my agenda when I get a chance.
I imagine you're getting to it, but we've got a question online about how you treat the mites or how you deal with that issue.
Yes, so there's multiple factors. There is miticides, which you put in the hive. We cannot do them during honey flow season, so it's done in the off season in August. We take the supers off, we put them in where the bees are being treated. We just sit them down in between, and they put it's like a little oil that kind of gets in their skin and goes into where they need to go. It coats the hive on the inside. So we are very careful with that type. I try not to use it. It's harder on them. A lot of times they'll make a queen stop laying, depending on the type. There's 4 different types. Most of them are strips. Most of them are very easy to administer. Many of them the bees do not like. I don't like them either. But our primary one that we use, that we have gone to quite frequently, it works well, is oxalic acid, which is actually nature-based. It's the powder you can find on rhubarb leaves. It's just in concentrate. So that can be used at any time. It's approved to be used with honey supers on. We still try not to. We don't really like to. We want to keep it as separate as possible, but it can be done, and it should be, because a lot of times if your queen is laying brood, that's when you want to get in there. Bees lay eggs in the brood, and that's where they live most of their life. Then once they hatch, they come into your hive. Oxalic acid does not penetrate that brood because it's capped. So it won't go into that brood and protect it beforehand. It kills the mites after the mite or the bee has been born. So it's kind of a balancing act. You have to keep repeating it because you want to go through a brood cycle, which is basically when they're hatched, when they're laid to when they're hatched. So we have to keep doing it every couple days for, I think, up to a couple months. So we try to keep on top of it that way. And oxalic acid, there's new methods coming out to use it as like a sponge or as like a liquid drip. They're working with that, so it's not just a vapor. Right now we have a vapor gun. So you basically take the powder and you actually have a vapor gun that goes in the front of the hive, and it spreads a vapor through it. So we have to be careful. It doesn't harm the bees at all. It has no effect on the bees, which shocks me, and I'm very grateful, but it can damage our lungs. So we have to wear a vaporizer mask, and it's a whole process, but it is the most effective, most natural form of miticide we can find. So that's our go-to for the most part. Once in a while, if it does not work, there are some bees or some mice that are resistant. Or if we put our bees in a place where someone else does not treat, they can cause a mite bomb on ours, and it's just too big for that vapor to get to. So we have to use a stronger chemical to treat that. It's just the things you have to notice or know about your neighbors or people who have bees besides you. It's a common thing. We like backyard beekeepers. We just like to know what they treat, how they treat. So that's an ongoing thing. Yep.
We've got another question.
Yes.
Do the mites affect the quality of the honey?
No, because it's in the brood, it's not in the honey. So what happens is, more often than not, it's in the summertime or in the fall. It's in the hive in the winter or during the honey season. But we put queen excluders on our boxes. So this is where the brood would be. We put a queen excluder on. Queen cannot go up and lay eggs in the honey supers. It's easier for us. Some do, some don't. We just prefer not to have to deal with brood in the honey. It all gets filtered. It's not going to be in your honey, but we want just straight honey. We don't have to worry about losing bees because she laid eggs in the middle of our honey pattern. So when that queen excluder goes on, the queen cannot lay brood above that. The mites are not going to be in that. They don't go into honey. They don't care about the honey. They're just harming the bees. So the worker bees that take care of the brood is where you'd find it the most. They're not going to be in that honey box. So it doesn't affect the honey at all. Any other questions? It's good. So that's pretty much the biggest part of the winter part. We do have spring as well. So when it comes to middle of winter, as I said, they don't lay brood. They're only surviving. That's their biggest goal. The bees that were laid in September or in October, last round of bees, are actually developed a little differently. And it's very important because we need to know when that happens. This past year was a very off year, And we actually had delayed season, which took us completely by surprise. So we brought our bees home thinking, hey, it's the end of the season, you know, they're getting ready to winterize, they're getting ready to do their fall stuff. And the next thing we know, we got bombarded with honey. They had a nectar flow, a late nectar flow. So that means she was laying longer in that time period. Because if there's a nectar flow, they're pulling comb out, which means they're drawing empty combs frames out. They're putting honey stores in. The queen is laying eggs because, hey, it's a boom. We got to get more bees. We got to grow bigger. So if we didn't give the space that they needed, they became honey bound, which means that not only were they laying in the supers, they were laying here and the queen couldn't lay any eggs. Because we didn't have enough space for those fall eggs, the winter season was a little off. It could have been a little off. We threw a few things in and traded boxes as quick as we could, but we have to watch for that. So that's when that time period where the winter bee was actually being made. And if we hadn't caught it for her to lay those eggs, she wouldn't have had enough bees for the winter to keep her in that winter bee season. So it's a constant watching game to see what they're doing. They change things randomly and we think we know what they're doing and we really don't. We just kind of watch and go, well, what are they doing now? I don't understand. And we've gone out before and my husband and I haven't watched and looked and gone, it doesn't make any sense. Well, we'll just go with it because there's nothing you can do but go with it. They do what they want to do.
Yeah.
They're not pets. They're not,
Yeah.
they have their own instincts that we don't know about. So it's kind of interesting some days to see how that works.
So not always as predictable as.
Correct.
we expect it to be.
Correct. Yeah.
And complicated than I ever thought.
They
it was.
are.
It's
They're
just
fascinating.
interesting. Yeah.
So we can actually go out in our apiary and go box to box to box to box. And you're like, well, they're all honeybees. They should all, and they're from the same location. Why are they not doing the same exact things?
Yeah.
This hive may be great at laying brood, but does not know the first thing or does not want the first thing when keeping honey. The next one, they are full, packed with honey, and that queen is going, we got enough bees. I'm not laying much eggs. I'm just gonna, what do I want to do? And hive to hive has different perks and different features that they're good at. So our goal is to kind of balance it out and make sure they all have what they need so that we can combine it and say, you're good at this, you're good at that. We'll find a way to make it so we can have a balance. So we'll take half of your brood, take out half of your brood and flip them. So you have this new genetic mix kind of these queens going or bees going, hey, we want more honey in here. Hey, we want more eggs in here. And we can kind of balance out what the hives look like. So we have strong hives going in the winter. That's our whole summer, watching how they're actually working and seeing what they do. And there are times when we go in and go, yeah, you guys aren't cutting it. So we'll be queen. We put a new queen in. And it's just the quickest, easiest fix. So we know this hive has a really good queen. She has everything we want. We learned last year how to graft from that queen. So we take eggs, make a whole frame of queen cells, because that's another whole project. And it's fascinating to me. I loved doing it last year. We had so much fun. And you can actually get new queens from that reliable queen that you like. And say, I'm gonna make more of that kind to see how you do.
So you don't just go to Walmart and buy them.
No.
I'm like, how do you get these queens? Like, do you buy
So
them?
yeah, you're doing it. It's funny because I was actually out delivering some last year and I'm like, okay, this just looks odd. I'm meeting people random places and here's a queen.
Here's
Here you go.
How many queens do you need?
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. I mean,
That's
other people who have hives who go, yeah, I'm not happy with this queen, or hey, my bees aren't happy with her either, and they killed her off. We need a new queen. Because if you don't replace it in time and it goes a certain length of time without a new queen in that hive just goes, no, this isn't working. We gotta go, we gotta leave. And they will literally leave. Or they have a worker bee who tries to lay eggs and they're not fertilized. They're just not, it's not gonna work. So we have to really play with it and really be observant to what that hive is doing every day. Yep. So that's another summer project that we do and it's really fun.
We've got a two-part question.
Okay.
One is, where can you get a new queen? The second is, does the old queen mind being deposed?
She does not like being deposed, and I find it heartbreaking. I don't like to do it. It breaks my heart every time I have to do it. And I know I need to, and I know the hive will benefit from it. But you literally have to pinch that queen and put her back in the box because her pheromones are still in that hive, regardless of whether you want her or not. If you're saying you want to replace her, you put her in the bottom, they know she is dead, they will carry her out and they'll look for a new queen. So if you put a new queen in at the same time that that one is pinched, they will say, oh, we have one here. Let me get you, and they'll get used to her scent because she's in a cage. And she actually will be in that cage until they eat this candy in one end. The work would be to eat the candy and release her. By the time that's done, they have her scent. Her scent is in that hive.
Huh.
So they were like, oh, okay, there's our new queen. That's who's in charge now. So it's very, I just don't like doing it. I feel bad every time I find a dead bee anyway.
Yeah.
Like these are my bees. But you can order new queens. Most beekeepers, all backyard beekeepers don't always, their hives aren't big enough for them to worry about, and you have to have a nuke or have a smaller hive for that queen to go into until she's bred. So backyard beekeepers need queens, they go to a bigger, like something like us, or even bigger. There's a few different ones in the state. A lot of them already order in from out of state though. There's big producers who mass quantity queen bees. There's a few places that are looking for specific genetics on queens, specific breeds. So there's always a source. It just depends on what you're looking for to get. So anybody who needs one, if you're out there have bees and need a queen, you should have some this summer, or we know where to get some for you. So that's an option. Did that answer that question? Okay. Any more?
Is the hive always receptive to a new queen?
No, yeah, shockingly, no. They can decide that, hey, guess what? We don't want her. Even after she's been let out, they go, nope, this isn't a match for us. We don't want her. So we have to check again in a couple days after she's out and make sure that she's still in there and that she is going to be accepted, because that can cause a whole bunch more problems if they decide they don't want her. So the queen, when we put them in, replacement queens, like I said, are in a cage. Actually, hold on. Yeah, here it is. So this is all it is. This is the size of it right here. And the queen will be in there with 2 worker bees. They'll have 2 bees with her who are attendants. They make sure she gets fed and watered. You know, anything that comes in, they actually feed her. She's helpless in some ways. On the end, there's a little tiny hole just big enough for a bee to get through. And that's where they get put in. So they'll eat through that candy and then she's released into the hive. This is if you buy a queen already mated, already produced. Now there is another way. Sometimes it's easier if you look in your hive and go, huh, there's no queen. They make their own queens. And that's how the whole, you know, they'll decide, okay, we're gonna get rid of her, but we're gonna have a backup just in case. And they actually have a cell ready to turn into a queen. So if you go in and look, we've gone in a few times and go, why are they doing that? This hive is doing great. Well, they have these queen cells on the ready going, they're going to be prepared. We want to make sure that if anything happens to her or we don't like her, we can have one on backup. So,
Spare queen.
exactly. So, and that's also the case. So there's 2 different ways. If they're swarm cells, which means, hey, we're getting ready to swarm out of this hive. They'll have a swarm cell, which a lot of times is on the bottom of your frames. Or it's in the middle, and it's like that's a super seeder cell, which means we're changing queens. We're gonna update the whole thing. We're gonna just get a new queen in. So when we watch that, we can kind of go, well, you know, this hive seems pretty smart. They seem to know what they want. We're gonna let them do their thing. We'll come back and check them in about a week. See if that's hatched out, if a new queen is there. So sometimes it's better to let them do their thing and not try to take over. It depends on what your production level is, what your hives are at, what your goal is for that hive. So sometimes it's better to let them do what they want to do and just sit back and see how it comes out. But there are times the queen just is not accepted. So
Do the queens look different than the regular?
they do. So queens are longer. They have a longer body. Their wings are shorter than their body. And the funniest thing is the fact that queens, when they're full production, after they're bred and have been laying for a while, it's hard for them to fly. So if that hive says we're swarming and you're going, they will literally run her through that hive and make her thin out and not let her eat, and make her lose weight to say we're going, and they will literally force her out to fly and leave. So there's different things where she's like, like I said, it's a balance. Oh, that hive decides what's happening more than the queen, most often than not. Now, if the queen is still in the hive and they've hatched a new queen to say we're gonna get rid of you, those queens can fight it out if they don't kill her first. So your hive dynamics are just interesting to see how they work. And there's been plenty of times where the queen is not producing, but she still has enough to kill the new queen that they just hatched. Says, no, you're not taking over. And the hive doesn't grow because she's not laying right. And that's when they'll actually go in and take care of her themselves. So there's a whole bunch of dynamics in the hive. Yes.
How long does, what's the lifespan of the queen that doesn't have any social?
Okay, so a queen can last up to 5 to 6 years,
Really?
which is longer than any bee. Bees have a life cycle, like I said, summer bees up to a couple months and winter bees up to 6 months. So the queen can last as long as she's doing well. We've had hives where we've got a queen in there, she's doing great, 4 years in, no problems. If I see they're doing okay and their hive is strong and healthy and surviving winter consistently, I like to leave them because I'm like, hey, why mess with something that's working? But the lifespan of a queen is much longer than your worker. She doesn't work, she's in the hive only. She doesn't go out and fly and forage and work herself to death. The summer bee literally works itself to death. So that's the difference in the different roles that they have.
So the worker bees have a short life.
Yes, they do. Yeah. The summer worker bee does. Even the winter ones do, because they only live long enough, like I said, to survive winter. They're hatched in the fall. By the spring, when the queen is laying, they're starting their roll. And by the time the new brood is hatched and going and working, they're done. Their lifespan is done. Now drones will last. I don't know how long a drone will live because they're kicked out of the hive in the fall. They don't really cycle through like the worker bees do. They don't work. They're just lazy. But they're kicked out of the hive in the fall because the worker bees do not want freeloaders. So anything that's not useful is gone. And it's kind of sad to see because you go out in front of your hive, like I got a pile of dead bees or bees that are hanging out on the ground outside and it's cold out. They're not allowed back in at all.
So what do the drones do?
Drones only exist to mate with the queen
Okay,
and to socialize. They
okay.
have no other purpose.
We don't help with the production of
No,
the honey.
no production,
nothing.
nothing. They're social.
Yeah.
And I think actually the only other benefit to having drones is in the summertime. So when you have all of your brood in your hive, your brood has to stay warm. Has to stay warm. So the more bees in the hive, the warmer it is. Your nurse bees will stay with them and kind of cover them and heat that hive to begin with. Having more drones in your hive is more body heat. So that does help too. If you have a lot of drones in, they can do that. But that's pretty much all we do. So, yeah. And they're easy to spot. They're big fat bees. And I looked at them like, where did that thing come from? And it's huge.
Okay.
And that's the drone bee because they just don't do anything. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So the other side of this is in the fall. Start mixing food. So food is interesting. We have during the winter, like I said, the candy boards and whatever food they put aside. We have to prepare for spring when they first start getting ready to hatch, because what you want is to push that queen to say, hey, spring is definitely here. There is not enough resources from what blooming trees there are for them to start making food right away. This is all good for keeping them fed, but nutritionally they need more. So we actually make pollen patties to go on the hive. We can't use these in the fall because if there's pollen about, they think that that's spring or that is harvest or time for the work. We don't want that. So we're careful when we put pollen on. So in the spring when it's warm enough and she can start laying eggs and they can find enough to forage on, pollen is available, we'll put these on and say, hey, you guys can start getting ready. You can start getting ready to lay eggs. To start producing again, because that's their sign that it is time for them to start growing and to have more eggs. So we mix our own. It's a pollen substitute, honey, water, and some very good nutrition that they need to have that helps boost their bodies. Because by the time it gets here in the spring, they're kind of right, obviously, they've survived. All I've done is survive. So we want to give them a boost to their body and say, hey, here's some nutrition you may not have gotten. Even the honey they have is usually good, but we are learning that some of the fall stores with some of the tree stuff they use and with some of the pollens they use in late fall actually isn't so much good for them sometimes. And it can run them down and make them just a little bit weaker because it's giving them the wrong kind of nutrition. So it's a whole other science. The pollen, the nutrition, the nectars, all the things that they feed on, they bring back to that hive is another broad, very broad topic. So I'm learning more. We never stop learning. We're always finding out something new. And that's the next thing we want to explore is the nutrition that they're getting and how they're getting it and where they're getting it from and why they're bringing it back. First thing in the spring with the mud, we provide them water, we provide them liquid sugar, we provide them liquid feed. But you will find any mud puddle that is the grossest, dirtiest, muddiest mud puddle that you can find. There's a whole pile of bees. They're looking for vitamins and nutrition and vitamins that is in the soil that they want and need. And if you follow that, they find what they need. Their body tells them, hey, this is what you gotta find, and they go find it. Pine, you have shavings piles, corn piles, they're like mounted on that. They love it. And I'm like, why you guys, we're giving you everything you need. They find what they want to find that they need in their body. So that's something we're kind of learning to balance out too. Going, well, what is it you're looking for? We can help you with that. So that's another broad factor we're gonna try to do. So there's a ton of stuff. Here, if you guys, there's some pollen substitute. It's not real pollen, but, and don't open it all the way, it's very fine powder. The smell of this is absolutely amazing. When we mix our food, that's something that goes in it, and I'm like, I can see why the bees like it. It's something else that goes in. I'm like, oh, what is that? You know, where do you find that? So it's not full pollen. It's something that we use as a substitute, and it's just mixing their food. I'm like, oh, I won't be that. I like this.
Yeasty.
It does a little bit, yes. So it's just something that one more feature of something that we like. I was telling them earlier, we have a metal connex that we store all of our equipment in on the off season. And we've gone in the middle of winter, on like a warm day, middle of winter, and you just open that door, and all you can smell is honey, bees, smoke from the smokers, the pine from the boxes, and that combination of smells is just like soaking up summer. Like, I needed this today. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of amazing things that we just learn every day. The other thing I have is just something that we have as a tool constantly. I keep it in my pocket all the time. Even in the off season, you never know when you need a hive tool. I have 3 or 4 in my car. He has 4 or 5 in his truck. We keep one on each hive lot that we have, and this is a hive tool. You cannot go anywhere without it. Your smoker is important. This is more important. Doesn't matter if you smoke them, you can't open the boxes without this thing. So when I said propolis earlier, what bees do with the propolis is they completely cement their boxes together. So we have this box and one on top of it, and we had to wedge and crack it apart. It's that tight. They like to seal everything. It's completely compacted. It is a glue, complete glue. So this is what we keep with us every time we go in the hive yard, anytime we're in the vehicle. In my bee suit, I have a couple. We've lost, I don't even know how many we've lost because you put them down somewhere and they just disappear. So I've gone back to the lots here and there. I'm like, how did we lose 10 of them in this hive? So that's another tool we keep with us all the time. Any other questions? Because that's pretty much my whole thing for the bees for the winter.
How many hives do you have?
So right now we're down to 20. Yeah, we want to grow even more. We grow every year and it fluctuates seasonally. We grow in the summer, sell some in the summer, and we keep on growing constantly. We have quite a few different lots that we use, and we are just learning all the time how to grow more. It's fun to split them. It's fun to grow hives. It's fun to find new queens. It's just something that it doesn't stop. Once you start trying, it just doesn't stop. There's always a place to take them, always a place to put them. So
And other than mice and small rodents, do you have trouble with any other predators?
Bears.
Bears is one. We haven't had much with them, and it is quite frankly, we're surprised we haven't. At our apiary at our house, we actually had a row of them in our backyard, and our neighbor lives right above the hill from us. And between it is a whole line of trees and swamp. And we're standing there one day, this was a couple of years ago, and we're like, what is that noise? And we're like, whatever it is, must be the neighbor's dog crashing through the trees. And no, it wasn't. A bear literally ran between his yard and our lot and just ran right up through the middle. Never bothered them, never stopped, never did anything. We've gotten calls from people where we put our bees out and it's, hey, you might want to check your hives. A bear just ran through right past where your bees are. So we've checked them, nothing. I'm like, oh, thank God. So the weird thing that we didn't know until the last little while is that bees aren't really going for the honey. That's not what draws them in. What draws them in is actually the brood, the protein from the brood and the baby bees. They'll go to that, they'll eat the honey, and they're not going to turn down honey. But that's not what pulls them in. It's actually the baby bees and the brood. And that's what they'll eat first.
The bears.
Yeah. That's their nutrition stuff. We usually see more spring and fall. I've been told we have, like I said, we have not anything with ours, and we've had them in places where we expected to. We have 2 or 3 lots where we've already put the wire fencing up. We've already predetermined that it's going to happen. It hasn't, thank God. So they don't really go for what you think they do, which is thankful. The other thing we have to watch was turkeys. We've had turkeys knock over whole hives before in 2 yards. And we're like, why is that here? It's not because it didn't damage them. It just knocked them over. Well, they land on them, they mess with them. And I'm like, okay, well, that's new.
Yeah.
Skunks. Skunks love eating dead bees off the front. We need to be very careful when we're eating dead outs to take the dead bees away from the hives because skunks, possums will come in and eat from the front, and the bees get pretty mad at that point when they're eating right from the very front because they'll eat them right off the porch of the front of the hive. So we try to avoid that part of it. Mice, voles, snakes like to get in the low hanging ones, and that's so my husband does not like snakes. There have been 2 or 3 hives we've gone to where I found a snake in a dead out hive, and I'm like, yeah, there's a snake in here. He goes, I'm waiting for you on the truck. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll take, it's just fine. He's honest. I'm like, yeah, it's gone. He goes, no, it's not gone. It's still because I'm on the box or whatnot. I'm like, I'll take care of it. It's done. So we joke about it. There's some things I don't like. I'm not fond of the mice, but I'm also not fond of the snakes. I'll deal with them as they come. I don't get stung. He doesn't care if he gets stung. I'm in a full hive suit. He's off in shorts and a t-shirt. So Mike, well, we're very opposite. We do things very different, but that's how we make it work, I guess. That's pretty much it for predators. At our house, our dogs don't even bother them. They'll go up to hang out in the front of them. Cats will sit on top of them. They don't care. The bees like, yeah, whatever. They're pretty laid back. Sometimes in August during a drought. So a drought is another very serious downfall for bees and beekeeping, is when there's not enough nectar or moisture in plants for them to get food. They'll have plenty of pollen, but you're not going to have any nectar, and they can't get honey without the nectar. So we have to watch. Kind of almost become weathermen apparently. You have to watch for that season when they stop getting nectar coming into the hive, because if they're not getting enough food, that they'll also swarm in that time period, or they'll die from not having enough food. So in that time frame is when we take any supers off. We take out any honey super we have on, and we store them or extract them. And we put on feed jars. You cannot feed your bees when you have honey supers on, because it's not real honey. They're making honey out of fake sugar water. You don't want that. So we're very careful that as soon as there's a drought, either we leave the food on and let them eat it, or we take it and harvest it and leave some behind, it's a balance. Everything is a balance. You know, sometimes it do, sometimes it don't. So for us, it's easier to pull the honey supers off, feed them the sugar water to make sure everybody's getting the same amount of food. And you can watch how much they're eating. So we have glass jars that sit on top of our hive, and we can watch what they're getting for food. So we kind of have to always watch their food income. It's a balancing act. The whole summer is just a giant balancing act. So, but yeah, those are the two hardest things for summertime, and the hardest thing for them to keep up with. So between predators, the mites, and just drought in general. Yeah. It's not easy, and there's a lot of different things. The other thing I do want to point out is we get questioned a lot about honeybees not being native. They came from Europe, which everybody knows. It's not an unknown fact. Everybody's, well, you're pushing out the native pollinators. I have to argue on that one, because when we first started having bees at our house, we had crabgrass, we had limited foraging, we had some trees, some good fruit trees, and some shrubs. Within the first year, we had clover, we had more dandelions, we had a lot more blackberries and strawberry, blackberries, raspberries, and flowering shrubs. And I noticed double the native pollinators in our yard. I'm like, they're not pushing it out. The more you bring in, the more they pollinate, the more resources there are, the more everything kind of comes together. So we had a lot more butterflies. We had a lot more of I don't know what they're called, honestly. It's the wrong needle body pollinators. They're not stinging insects, they're just natural pollinator. So we watch for them, and we share with that with a lot of people who know the more you have them in an area, you have to watch for it. You cannot flood one area with an overabundance of hives when you're feeding them, because that will damage it. But when you have them balanced in an area and you actually bring back native plants or native wildflowers or a lot more foraging, you're bringing back in more resources for your natural pollinators to enjoy with yours. I've had bumblebees in my hives where the bees are like, hey, that's not a pollinator. They don't let them stay there, but they get along. They're not pushing them out and not trying to fight. So it worked out really, really well. It's just fascinating to watch. The more you're around them, the more you're around them, the more you connect to nature. And that's been beneficial for both my husband and I, because I'm a dispatcher, he's a veteran. There's been many times where we're just like, we go home, we're stressed out, we're sick of the day, and we'll just sit with them. We're sitting in front of these hives like entertainment value. Well, that hive's doing really good today. So it's amazing to reduce the stress. You don't have to be in them to really enjoy them. In a hive, they have more fun just watching what they do, letting them fly around you, and just listen and be peaceful. So it's been helpful for both of us in many, many ways. Any other questions?
Well, what about people with gardens and they spray insecticides?
Yes, we have to really watch for that. We're very careful where we put our bees in. We've had a couple of places where we looked around. We try to put our bees in places that are away from a lot of development places. So we look for fields, old farmhouses, old places that just have a lot of open area. If we get to the point where we suspect someone may be treating, or we have to be careful not to just pick fights or argue people. We just observe and see what's around locations where we put our bees in, like, and we're not quite comfortable. They've really, really over manicure their lawn, or we know they're spraying, or that kind of thing. We've had other people who have come to us and said, hey, we're here, we're going to be there at this time, and we'll get our bees out or move them out. We have some orders that we put them into where they have to spray, and they'll tell us where they're from. Like, just let me know when you're spraying. We'll have them out within a day. You know, it's harder for us to do it at spur of the moment, but we can. So we really have to be aware of what's around where we put them. Orchards, some blueberry fields, I think, are really good about letting them know. They don't really spray anyway for blueberry fields, but there's places where we're kind of observing the neighboring properties going, I don't want to put myself in that situation of having to deal with dead bees because someone is treating their property. So we just kind of don't put them where we think there might be any question. It is a common thing. Who doesn't want to have a nice manicured garden or lawn? But it's still tricky to work around, so.
Is there such a thing as organic honey? Because I see that
So,
sometimes in the store.
We've gone round and round and round on this. Organic honey is so very, very hard to certify unless you have them in a spot that absolutely has no human interaction. You can't say they're organic, and I'm surprised they can put that label on, because if you're in a spot where someone drives by and throws a can out the yard, out the window, and it's a soda can or whatever have you, these will go to that. That's sugar. It's not real, it's sugar. It's just fake. That will disqualify you from being organic if it's found out. So you don't know where your bees are going. They can fly up to 5 miles from their hive. Generally it's 3, can be up to 5. If there's anybody in that area that has anything that's sugary that they toss out, they're going to be into it at some point because it's free, easy sugar. So you can't, it is, again, I don't want to criticize anybody going organic. I just don't want to go there. But it's hard to prove that it's organic unless you fully keep testing it. And it's not a route we want to go down on our end. It's not worth my time. We know it's pure. We know where we put them. We don't guarantee anything on where it is, but we do as much natural as possible. And that's all I'm telling everybody. We do the best we can to stay as natural, clear as possible. So it's hard. It's not easy. Any organic method is not easy. It is expensive. You're getting certified, you're proving your product is something that is organic. I can't prove that online. Sadly.
I was always suspicious of that label.
It's hard to prove, and I don't know. I'm not going to be the one to go and question them on how they can prove it is. It's just one of those tricky situations where you trust them, and that's, it's your good hard money you're spending on it. So it is what it is. But yeah, these are very much independent creatures. They're not going to tell you where they're going. And there's been times where we've seen articles before, some company, I'm sure you've probably seen it, some company posted, hey, we've got blue honey. And they could not for life of them figure out where this blue honey was coming from. No idea what it was, no idea what flower it was. They finally tested it. It was near an M&M's factory. They could die from the candy that they got into. Not made blue honey.
Oh, wow.
So it's just fascinating. Bees will do what they want to do. They're going to go to the quickest, easiest source they can in most regards, because I've told my husband, I'm like, we put sugar on one year, but we put it on a little too early. We're getting ahead. I'm like, we're going to get ahead of this. We're going to be prepared. We put it on, and the bees said, no, we don't want it. They literally lugged the sugar out of the hive and threw it out the front of the hive, going, we don't want it. It's not mine. I don't want it. They would, a lot of times, more often than not, our hives will go to natural resources before they'll take the stuff we provide them. And that's a good thing. I like the fact that they do. It kind of frustrates me sometimes when they're not getting what they need, but I'm like, okay, well, if that's what you want, and in the spring, that's how they are. They would rather kill themselves going out in the cold, trying to find the pollen they know is there, but not enough to take what we've given them from sources. So it's like, you're so smart, you're kind of stupid sometimes, in the way that it works. 2 years ago, we had a hive. It was 2 boxes deep, and they were full. We opened them like, that is the strongest hive I've ever had over winter. That is amazing. I love this hive. 2 weeks later, in March, no less, when it was warm and there was resources beginning to come available, we went out and the hive was dead, completely dead. I'm like, there was tons of bees. You couldn't have frozen. It's not cold enough. There's no way that you guys didn't have enough food. You had tons of food. So we brought the state inspector in, and we had him look at it and go, what is happening here? And she goes, we have plenty of food. I'm not seeing any mites. There's no mites in the bottom, really. Maybe 1 or 2, but not enough to have damaged your hive. She goes, so what it looks like is this hive was so big, they thought they couldn't feed themselves because they were too big, wouldn't eat. They were starving themselves from the food they had available because they thought there wouldn't be enough resources. And that's what she explained. I'm like, okay, so they were so smart, they were stupid. I'm like, that's my biggest time. You guys decided you weren't gonna eat. How does that work? So it was just, it's interesting to things where like for us it's common sense, for them it's like, no, we're surviving, and this is how we survive. I'm like, there's no reasoning with that. They're just bees. So, yeah. Anything else?
Any more questions?
yeah, I've gone over everything I've got, and I think, I hope I explained everything clearly to you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bev.
Yeah. If you want to say, check out the Facebook page, we post randomly how things are going with our hives and new things we find out and learn. So any updates or you want to follow along, just check us out because we do keep a lot of things posted. So that's an option.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to get more of Bev, she'll be doing several open hives throughout the season here at McLaughlin, as well as other presentations. So make sure to check our events page and find out when those are happening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great program.